The obligatory acts of the purificatory bath. غسل وفروض الغسل ثلاثة المضمضة والاستنشاق وغسل سائر البدن. The obligatory acts of the purificatory bath are three: rinsing the mouth, snuffing or sniffing water up one's nose up to the soft part of the nose. Now here some people, what they do is that they take water up to the nose to such a degree that they take the water up to the soft part that their eyes start watering, or they feel the water going up to the forehead. Is this necessary? The answer is no. It's like when you perform sajda, some people think on carpets you must perform sajda with such force that eventually a mark will appear on the forehead. But if you perform sajda on the carpet, it's not necessary to press down so hard until eventually a mark appears on the forehead. Likewise, if you perform ghusl, it's not essential that the water goes up into the head. It's sufficient that it goes up to the bone. So you take the water up to the bone. This much is sufficient. And washing the entire body. So if someone has a shower, before having a shower, they gargle the mouth, sniff water up the nose, and in the month of Ramadan they avoid gargling to the throat. Just avoid water down the throat. Sniff water up to that, it goes up to the bone, not into the head. Then with the shower you bathe yourself, meaning you make sure the entire body is wet, including the belly button. So you make sure some water gets into the belly button, you place your finger into the belly button, making sure the belly button is also wet. Some people ask the question that what if after ghusl you perform you had a shower, but then you later realize I didn't gargle my mouth or sniff water up the nose. Do you have to re-perform the entire ghusl? The answer is no. What do? You just perform the gargling, placing water in the nose. Or if you wash the entire body and you left one part dry, later on you remember, I left this part dry, what do? You just go back and you just wet that part. That's sufficient. The obligatory acts of dry ablution, tayammum. The question will be answered in the Q&A because this is regarding shisha, so which people smoke. We'll answer that in the Q&As. You can send all your questions to the front in questions and answer session. If the question relates to the topic, I will answer the question now. If it relates to anything else, we will have after this session, we are going to have, inshallah, open questions and answers regarding anything. The question then should be, is shisha an intoxication? The answer is, shisha doesn't fall under intoxication. But the next question would be, is shisha haram? Inshallah, we'll answer that in questions and answers. وفروض التيمم النية ومسح الوجه وذراعين بالتراب أو ما هو من جنسه كالحجر والرمل ونحوهما بجميع اليد أو أكثرها بضربتين وما يقوم مقامهما. The obligatory acts of dry ablution. Dry ablution meaning tayammum. Meaning when there is an absence of water for a mile radius, you perform tayammum, dry ablution. What are the conditions? Number one, the intention. So when you perform tayammum, you must have intention for tayammum, that I am going to perform tayammum. Second, wiping one's face, meaning they have the material, whatever the material may be, a stone, a rock, a brick, a wall, sand, or earth. So the person rubs his hand, and the first thing, he first makes the intention, I'm making intention of tayammum. He rubs his hands upon the material. So the first obligation is to rub the face. The question is it essential that there is dust on the hands? The answer is no. So if you touch a wall, after touching the wall there's no dust on your hands, you rub your face, that's sufficient.
But the wall can't be plastered in it.
Yeah, but when we go on to the materials, I'll mention that. So and wiping forearms with soil or that which is classified as such as stones, sand and the like, with all of one's hand or most of it with 2 strikes, or by that which is a substitute for them. So here, wiping the forearms, second obligations. First one was wiping the face, second one is wiping the forearms. So how does a person do this? They touch the material, wipe the face, then they touch the material again, then they wipe one forearm, then wipe the other forearm. Once they have wiped both forearms, they have completed tayammum. So what substance is used? He mentions here stones, sand and the like. The condition for the substance is that the substance is from the ground, but the substance should be such a thing that if you throw the substance in fire, the rule is if you throw it in fire, the substance will not burn. So what he mentioned regarding plaster, if you throw plaster in fire, what will happen to plaster? Plaster which is covered with paint will not be permitted for tayammum. So marble is permitted, but marble with lacquer will not be permitted. But rock is permitted, stone is permitted, soil is permitted, sand is permitted. Why is metal not permitted? Because if you throw metal in fire, what will happen to metal? Melt. So that's the rule regarding the material used for tayammum. The conditions for the validity of dry ablution. وشرط صحته وجود العذر المبيح له كبعده ميلا عن الماء ولو في المصر وبرد يخاف منه التلف أو المرض وخوف عدو وعطش واحتياج لعجن لا لطبخ مرق وفقد آلة وخوف فوت صلاة جنازة عيد وليس من العذر خوف فوت الجمعة والوقت. The conditions for its validity is the presence of an excuse that permits it, such as one being remote from water by the distance of a mile, even within a city. So here in brackets the translator has placed half an hour or more of walking. I would say 15 minutes of walking. 15 minutes of walking is a mile. So if someone is lost in an area, they know that if they walk for 15 minutes in one certain direction, or they actually walk, they know water is unavailable in that direction, then they are permitted to perform tayammum. Extreme cold, from which one fears loss of life for limb or illness, meaning imagine someone living in the North Pole or in Siberia and they are unable to perform wudu because the water is so cold, or they melt the snow and gain water from the snow. Would they be permitted to perform tayammum? The answer is yes. This is why Iqbal, the poet, mentions that in India over 10,000 people from Siberia arrived. They said, we want to accept Islam, to some of the Indian ulama. We want to accept Islam, but we find ablution difficult because our country is cold. So those scholars said, you cannot perform your prayer except with ablution. You are not permitted to do this. So those people moved away from Islam. What fatwa should they have given? That you are permitted to perform tayammum, and therefore they would have entered Islam. Number 3, fear of an enemy or thirst. So if someone's house is surrounded by people and they are unable to come out the house, or they have thirst and there is only a small amount of water available, they are permitted to perform tayammum. The need for water to make dough, not to cook broth. Meaning, someone lives in an area, an habitat which has only sufficient water to make bread. Because bread is an essential food, therefore they use the water for bread and they are permitted to perform tayammum. But broth is not an essential food. So therefore if they have water only for broth, meaning soup or broth, then they perform ablution. If they have bread and meat. A lack of an instrument to extract water. So there is no instrument available in order to extract water. And fear of missing the funeral or Eid prayer. Funeral and Eid prayer are the only two prayers for which a person is permitted to perform tayammum. Why is this? Because funeral, if you miss the funeral that was permitted by the inheritor of the dead person, you cannot repeat such a funeral. So a man dies, his son permits the funeral. Later on, you cannot repeat the funeral in the Hanafi school. In other schools, you are permitted to repeat. But because there is no repetition of the funeral, you are permitted now to perform tayammum if you have no time. So the imam does takbir, Allahu Akbar, and you have no time now to join the prayer. Except by performing tayammum, you are permitted to perform tayammum. And the same for Eid prayer. Why Eid prayer? Because Eid prayer has no replacement. Unlike Jumu'ah prayer, Friday prayer, Salatul Jumu'ah, the replacement is Salatul Dhuhr, meaning the afternoon prayer. So you are not permitted to perform tayammum for Jumu'ah prayer. Fear of missing the Friday prayer and one of the 5 daily prayers is not a legitimate excuse permitting dry ablution. Are there any questions regarding this?
You know the Eid prayer, if there's a Jamaat later on, then you don't have to do tayammum for that.
The question is regarding if there is a second Jama'ah for the Eid prayer. If the second Jama'ah is in another masjid, then you are permitted. In either case, you are still permitted. Why? Because takrarul Eid is not permitted in our school. Meaning, if you perform Eid in one place, Jummah and Eid is not re-performed in the same place. Even though the masajid tend to do this. Question is regarding if you have greater ritual impurity and you perform tayammum, you would have to intend tayammum to remove the greater ritual impurity. You would have to intend tayammum that you are doing tayammum in order to remove greater ritual impurity.
He said when water is available, would you have to do a ghusl then after, once tayammum is done?
Meaning, if water comes after.
He's done the tayammum to remove the ritual impurity, but then water becomes available later. Will you have to do ghusl now?
Again, this question is, if someone does tayammum and then water becomes available, will the tayammum be invalidated? The answer is yes. So like this, the scholars have a riddle. A man is performing prayer. He does not pass wind. He doesn't laugh out aloud. He doesn't bleed. But his prayer is invalidated because his purity is invalidated. How does this happen? The answer to the riddle is, he was a man in a state of tayammum and water appeared in front of, meaning someone placed a bucket of water in front of him. So water will invalidate tayammum, meaning sufficient water will invalidate tayammum.
And just for them, you know the question we asked before in regarding salah, if the time was about to collapse, can they do tayammum and pray the salah, or would they do wudu and pray qaza?
If there's less time for the prayer, then the person must perform wudu if water is available. If they miss the prayer, then they perform qada. They make up the prayer.